Anita Dunn, welcome.
Howie, thanks for having me.
As we heard, President Obama on Friday said that he did not deserve the Nobel Peace Prize. It wasn't something he sought. And yet you have all these conservative commentators saying this is a joke, it's an outrage, it's somehow a bad thing. What's your reaction to that?
Well, you know, a week ago on the previous Friday, many conservative commentators had been rejoicing in the fact, celebrating in the fact that the United States didn't get the Olympics. 1 week later, they seem to be somewhat bitter at the fact that, you know, an American president was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. So I think people will draw their own conclusions about the reflexive negativity on the part of some commentators, regardless of what happens. Well, I think the bigger point, though,
go ahead.
You know, I think the bigger point is that, and the president himself said this, was that he was surprised, as I think most of the press corps was. He feels that he, you know, didn't really deserve it, as I think, you know, there are many people who feel that this is still, you know, particularly in terms of this presidency, it's the first year. So I think that, you know, that those people who are saying, you know, this is really quite unusual, this really does seem to be, you know, a big surprise to everyone.
Yeah,
you know, that's not out of bounds. Okay. Absolutely not out of bounds. I think, you know, I think what the president also said, though, today on Friday.
Let me interrupt you because we're short on time, and we'll play what the president said. We're talking about conservative commentators, so let's talk about Fox News. You were quoted this week in Time magazine as saying of Fox News, it's opinion journalism masquerading as news. What do you mean masquerading? Well,
you know, Howie, I think if we went back a year ago to the fall of 2008, to the campaign, that, you know, it was a time this country was in two wars, that we'd had a financial collapse, probably more significant than any financial collapse since the Great Depression. If you were a Fox News viewer in the fall election, what you would have seen would have been that the biggest stories and biggest threats facing America were a guy named Bill Ayers and something called Acorn. I mean, the reality of it is that Fox News often operates almost as either the research arm or the communications arm of the Republican Party. And it's not ideological. I mean, obviously there are many commentators who are conservative, liberal, centrist, and everybody understands that. What I think is fair to say about Fox, and certainly the way we view it, is that it really is more a wing of the Republican Party. Best evidence of that.
Is that the reason the president did not go on Fox News Sunday a few weeks back when he did all the other Sunday shows? And will President Obama appear on Fox News again, let's say, this year?
Well, you know, Howie, President Obama appeared on, he did The Factor. He did O'Reilly.
Yes.
In the campaign last year. As president earlier this year when he met with news anchors.
Okay, my question is, will he appear on Fox in the next couple of months?
No, you had a two-part question. The first was, is this why he did not appear? And the answer is yes. Obviously, he'll go on Fox because he engages with ideological opponents, and he has done that before. He will do it again. I can't give you a date because, frankly, I can't give you dates for anybody else right now. But what I will say is that when he goes on Fox, he understands he's not going on, it really is a news network at this point. He's going on to debate the opposition, and that's fine. He never minds doing that. But if we put Fox in...
On that point, I'm going to interrupt you because I want to read a statement from Fox Senior VP Michael Clemente, who says the following. We'll put it up on the screen. An increasing number of viewers are relying on Fox News for both news and opinion, and the average news consumer can certainly distinguish between the A section of the newspaper and the editorial page, which is what our programming represents. So, with all due respect to anyone who might still be confused about the difference between news reporting and vibrant opinion, my suggestion would be to talk about the stories and the facts rather than attack the messenger, which over time has never worked. Your response?
Yes, well, I think that there have been numerous independent analyses that have looked at the difference between, say, CNN, ABC, NBC, and ABC, and Fox, and have seen that there is a very different story selection. There's a very different, even down to the chyron they run below stories, that, you know, this isn't us making it up, Howie. You study the media. You know that it's not just their opinion shows.
Take Major Garrett. He's the White House correspondent for Fox News. Right. Do you think he's fair? Do you think he's masquerading as a newsman?
I will say, and I have done this in my interviews, I have differentiated. No, I have not said that. I've differentiated between Major Garrett, who we view as a very good correspondent, and his network. And Major knows this. Major came to talk to me when we didn't include Chris in the round of Sunday shows. Chris Wallace in the Sunday shows. And I told Major quite honestly that we had told Chris Wallace that having fact-checked an administration guest on his show, something I've never seen a Sunday show do, and Howie, you can show me examples of where Sunday shows have fact-checked previous week's guests, and I'd be happy to see those. We asked Chris for an example where he had done that to anybody besides somebody from the administration in the year 2009, and we're still waiting to hear from him.
Right.
When they want to treat us like they treat everyone else, but let's be realistic here, Howie. You know, they're widely viewed as, you know, a part of the Republican Party. Take their talking points, put them on the air. Take their opposition research, put them on the air, and that's fine. But let's not pretend they're a news network the way CNN is.
But you are making a distinction, just before I move on, between the opinion guys, O'Reilly, Hannity, Glenn Beck, and people like Major Garrett.
Yes, I'm not talking about people like Major Garrett. I'm talking about the overall programming.
Okay.
For instance, Howie, the New York Times had a front-page story about Nevada Senator John Ensign and the fact that he had gotten his former chief of staff a job as a lobbyist, then helped those clients. His former chief of staff's wife was somebody Ensign had had an affair with.
Important story.
Right. Now, did you see coverage of that on Fox News? I'm not talking Glenn Beck. I'm not talking Sean. Not talking The Factor. I'm talking about Fox News.
I will have to check on that. I assume you know the answer. Let me ask you about the mainstream media in general. You and your colleagues at the White House seem to believe that journalists have fallen down on the job when it comes to allowing or spreading or repeating misinformation. Is that the problem, or is the problem that sometimes they are reporting information that's not to the administration's liking?
Oh, listen, there's never been an administration, starting with George Washington, who thought that they were covered the way they should be. We make mistakes. We have problems. We expect those to get covered. We expect to take our hits, and we do.
But are you leading a kind of an effort, almost like a war room effort, to combat statements that are made as part of this 24-hour news cycle that the president often deplores?
When the statements are untrue, when they mischaracterize, when they are using opposition research that's inaccurate, when people are just not being honest, absolutely, we're going to go out there and we're going to correct those facts. We learned over the summer that the mainstream media often will start covering these total inaccuracies as a controversy, and that's the way it gets into the press room. It's the way it gets on the front page of the New York Times. We're not going to let that happen. Stand by and let people go characterize the president's policies in ways that are simply not true.
Well, the media did blow the whistle on the so-called death panels and say that they were completely bogus. Go ahead and make your point.
Well, my point is very simple, which is that the Republican member of Congress who delivered the response to the president's address to the joint session of Congress on health care in September was one of the early sponsors of the so-called death panel legislation, which I don't believe you know, do you?
I'm happy to be educated. Let me ask you a last question before we go. To some extent, poll numbers being down, problems piling up, things are not going as well as you probably would like for the administration. I'm wondering whether the people at the White House are just a little shell-shocked because Barack Obama got such good coverage during the campaign, and now he's getting pretty typical presidential coverage, which is to say pretty rough coverage.
Oh, you know, the reality is one of the great strengths of President Obama as a candidate and as president is his ability to take the long view, understand there are going to be good times, there are going to be bad times. Certainly in the course of his 2-year campaign, Howie, and I don't think you would disagree, there were some times that were quite rough for us, in particular around the Pennsylvania primary and certainly in the general election as well. Yeah. Absolutely. And we understand that, and he understands better than anyone. You know, you're going to be up, you're going to be down. What is true, though, is that you do not have to be a passive bystander when your opponents are seeking not to have a debate on the issues, but simply to tear down the president and his presidency. And that's what we're not going to do. We will push back.
All right, White House is not going to be passive. Anita Dunn, thank you very much for joining us from the lawn.
Thank you, Howie.